Welcome to another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Teresa J. Canada, and welcome to everybody wherever you are. That I want to go on a topic today that discuss resegregation of schools. Now, you know, a lot of things I talk about in this podcast related to schools in the North specifically, and this topic today will deal with the issue of resegregated schools, if you understand what I mean by that. So basically, you know, we talked about the issues which took place in the North and in the South, specifically in the North in the mid-1960s. And I think that's really the focus that I've been in. But then what has happened since then? Now, there was a time when, of course, you know, children who look like me couldn't go to children who like some of my friends. So that says a lot. And this is, I mean, I'm still alive. What does that tell you? But my point, I'm just saying to you that we need to understand some of this so we can get a better perspective of what it's about. And that's why I've chosen to do this podcast, so people can learn and be knowledgeable and just educate and be exposed, and just have an understanding. You don't have to accept it. I'm not saying you have to accept it, but you need to understand. And that tells you a lot about where we are now and hopefully where we need to go in the future. Because if you don't have any knowledge about anything, how can you make a difference in this world? You just don't, okay? So today's topic is about resegregated schools. And why do I bring this up? Because, you know, there was a time, you know, when I was part of a process of so-called desegregating schools, but basically it wasn't really about desegregating school. It was about basically filling some seats in the schools that they were getting lower enrollments. So in essence, this topic today is about the efforts that were made to integrate schools and how now schools are just, quote unquote, just as segregated now as they were during the 60s, late 50s, 60s, and 70s, early 70s. But there's a key difference. Okay, and I'm going to explain a little bit of, just very briefly today, a little bit about that key difference. So, and I'll tell you what it is basically as a result of the growth of students of color. Schools are more segregated. You have more people of color, so therefore they're going to be attending schools, and the schools are going to have more people of color in the schools. So that's why schools are going to have an issue of resegregated, quote unquote, because you're going to have students who exist. What's the population? That's growth population, okay? That's the biggest issue. That's the growth population. So now, of course, with the whole segregation piece, it was big. It's a big deal in the South. And many people didn't even really know that schools were. I have a student said she didn't know schools were segregated in the North. Well, they were. And so it was separate schooling for children who looked like me and those who didn't look like me, like my shirt, okay? If you want to call that, whatever you want to call that. So I'm just saying to you, what were the options? So what happened? So for parents who didn't want their children to go to school with certain people, decided to send them to private schools in the South, and in some cases, parochial schools in the North. That's where some of the students attended school. They decided to leave the public schools and go to school elsewhere. And most of the time in the North, it was the parochial schools that was the trade-off. As if parents couldn't afford to send them to private schools per se, they would end up going to parochial schools, right? And in most cases in the North, it was mostly Catholic schools, from my understanding. I remember when they would have release time for religious instruction. And I'll be honest with you, I think I snuck out one day and went to see what it was about. I guess I was just curious person. So I think once I went to you know, but they didn't have a list of names, I guess, because I just happened, let me see what this is all about. So I'm just this little curious person. And I go with the kids that's going on release instruction time. And that's when I find out it's basically for people, I think they were Catholic people. They would go to, I don't know exactly what it was, but I think it was a Catholic, you know, release to go to Catholic training or Catholic review or something like that. But I did go once, okay? So that shows you my spirit of trying to explore things and see what's going on. So that's what happened. But that was really what the options were pretty much in the North as opposed to the South. Now, think about the 1970s. In the 1970s, they came up with the concept of magnet schools. And magnet schools are basically when it says like a magnet supposed to attract certain things. Well, magnet's supposed to attract certain things in the schooling. The magnet schools would like to attract students for certain areas of study. That means like if you were good in science or if you were good in art or whatever, those were the magnet schools for certain areas, specialties. So that was a way to, in a sense, remember now, a lot of the non-people of color would leave the city and go away, go to private schools or whatever, in order to attract them back into the city schools, which were where there was more seats. They would have magnet schools were developed. So this way, specialties for people who were focusing on the sciences, or people who were focusing on the math, or people focusing on the trades. I think some of that is occurring now as we speak here in the North, especially I think in Connecticut. So that's when magnet schools started in the 1970s. It was an effort to support desegregation in the northern urban schools. Another effort that was made was school vouchers, and that's a whole new topic by itself. I'm not going to go through all that today, but that's a whole new topic by itself. So it was a school choice. Parents would get vouchers, and they can then send their child to certain schools with this voucher that would pay part of the tuition for the school that their child was going to attend. So that was people who were taking their children out of public schools and putting them into other schools in many cases, to allow them to be able to attend schools outside. And I think that was another effort to, handle that handled. I'm not going to say exactly handle the topic of desegregation per se. Let me just double check. I'm just trying, just double check. But basically, it was, what was happening, during the 70s, and so forth. That these 80s and 90s, school vouchers became very, very popular. Okay. So the other thing that became popular was charter schools, which is still existing as we sit today. Now, charter schools were criticized as privatization of public schools. But basically the focus was still on school choice, give people, parents and children a choice. Now these schools are racially, according to the most recent studies, charter schools are schools that are racially isolated, and with the majority of the students in charter schools are students of color, Black and brown people. So where we reside in a community with various racial and ethnic groups, if you want to kind of avoid to have this separation per se, it all goes back to housing, as we mentioned before. Where you live is where you go to, where you attend school, and that's nothing wrong with that. But the way in which the housing situation has been constructed, not that much has changed. That's where you go to school. So if you live around people who all look the same, they're going to go to school with the people who look the same. If you go to school with people, if you live in a neighborhood with all types of people, then that's the school you're going to go to with people, all types of people. And that's the key. But not much of that's going to change. Has changed, and I don't know much is going to change, because in our society, we still have a problem with living with people who may not look like you. And it's not necessarily economic per se all the time, but it can be. But I'm just saying that's an issue. So if we reside in a community with various racial and ethnic groups, then schools will benefit from the diversity that exists within their own neighborhoods, and we won't have to worry about issues of having quote resegregated schools, whatever that's supposed to mean. So let me just also mention that the resegregation of schools, how it's defined, is like, it was probably all quote unquote white, and then of course it was quote integrated. And in the North, I think the biggest issue was it wasn't talked about, but it was happening. But it wasn't talked about. The biggest voice about segregated schools was, of course, taking place in the South. But when in fact in the North, it was not much different. But it was different pockets, because the issue in the North, I think, parents were moving from the cities, like moving out of New York City into the suburbs, going to Long Island, certain parts of the suburban part of the state, as opposed to staying in the major cities like Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, New York City, Albany. Most of the people moved outside of the cities so that they would not have to deal with the segregation, or desegregation efforts that were trying to take place in the North. This is in New York State, because I'm a New York State person. As a matter of fact, I'm a New York City person. So that tells you a lot right there in terms of how I experienced it. and how I see it happening now. So not much has changed, but like I said, now the big emphasis is on trying to provide the best education possible for people wherever they live. That's really supposed to be the goal, but it's not really what's happening. So I just want to mention that we have to think about, this quote unquote, we can't keep redefining. We need to just be able to just be able to be together and do what we need to do. And it's okay. Like I said before in the previous episode, you know, you can find excellence everywhere. Okay. You don't have to go to another school to be able to be excellent. You can be excellent from where you are. So I'll be talking more about that in other episodes about, the difference of how um, mostly Black children were always sent out of their neighborhoods, and the other kids never came into the neighborhoods that we left. And the same thing occurred for teachers. The teachers from, these so-called segregated schools were never given the same ability to go into these schools that the Black children were being, quote unquote, bused to. Even those people who actually bused on yellow buses, you did not see the same effort being put to have Black teachers in these predominantly quote white schools. And now if you go back, I think I did episodes about my previous elementary school where I started from kindergarten to third grade. I took a visual of that school, and I looked at it. Then I did a visual of the school I attended from fourth and sixth grade. Well, of course, as you noticed, the classes that I attended from fourth to sixth grade, the school that still exists, is still in existence. Okay, it's a neighborhood attendance, it still exists, but the school that I attended from kindergarten to third grade no longer exists. It's a housing. It's not torn down, but it's now a nice, supposedly a nice housing complex, to houses people. So why is that? Okay, why is that? All the schools I noticed, I'm just saying a lot of the schools that exist, you talk about resegregation, but also enrollments. Enrollments have dropped, precipitously in the elementary grade because of the populations, but the largest populations now are basically students of color. So, that's going to be an issue in the cities as well as the suburbs, I think. And we need to find a way to make sure that we can educate to all, regardless of where they are. And that's my concern. But basically, resegregated schools is a topic thinking about, and it's not just because of it's not a concern for me. My thing is like excellence should be wherever you go to school. It should be excellent. So that's this quick video. Let me hear your thoughts and what you think about this particular topic and how it can affect you. But I just want to give you information about it because, not much is going to change because, it's who goes to school and the people whose children exist. So you are who you are and you go where you go to school and you bring who you are to the school. So until the next episode, thank you for listening. Put your comments in the comment box. Thumbs up, thumbs down if possible, and subscribe and learn more about what's going on and the thoughts we have. If you have your thoughts, please share those with me as well. So until next time, have a great day, evening, night, wherever you are around the country, around the world, around the city, around the state. And we'll see you next time on another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters podcast. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.